I think, oh wow, this
Oh,
feels a little loud, but I
Okay.
think I might use it, Mark, because my throat at this stage is, if you don't mind. Or is this too?
No, I think
is
I
this
feel
too
like
loud?
we're performing at a
Is
rock
this
show.
okay?
I like
Yeah.
it.
All right. Nice.
Okay, you can stay in the back. All right. Okay. I think we're ready to go, right?
Yes.
All right. Maybe some people coming in. I want these people to leave. Okay, I'm going to do something. We did this before. I never read from my phone because I just think it's rude. I print things off on paper, but I thought because Melati is an eco-warrior, I wouldn't print on paper. And then she reminded me that she brought 50 books printed on paper, so...
I was like, Mark, come on. Recently published author over here.
So anyway, I have notes because we did this talk in Singapore just a couple weeks ago. So we'll get a little bit of an update, but anyhow, welcome. By the way, I'm Mark. I haven't met all of you, but I'm the founder of 1880. Super excited to be hosting the talk tonight. And it is an absolute pleasure to be welcoming Melati and her mother to Hong Kong to do our first talk with them, with her. And I'll tell you that I have known Melati, I think, for 6 or 7 years. We spoke at a conference together. There were many impressive speakers and lots of big names. And I listened to every single one of them. And I walked away with the conclusion that the youngest speaker, who was, I think you were 17 at the time, was absolutely the most impressive person on any panel who spoke at that conference. And so I introduced myself and we got to know each other. We've been friends ever since. What's amazing is that both my kids have become friends and our families are friends and they've come and stayed with us and etc. So we're very close. I'm very, very proud and honored to know Melati. She's an incredibly special person and I'm just going to impress you a little bit. Forgive me because I'm old. I'm going to impress you a little bit because if I try to do this with... Anyway, okay. So Melati started when she was 12 years old in Bali. She and her sister created something called Bye Bye Plastic Bag Movement, which eradicated the use of plastic bags in Bali, which was a huge problem. And two 12 and 13-year-olds managed to achieve that, a project that people have been trying to achieve around the world and haven't been able to. In addition to Bye Bye Plastics, Melati started a people movement called One Island, One Voice, which was to clean up beaches in Bali. She also started a social enterprise, Mountain Mamas, which encourages female entrepreneurship. She launched a company called YOUTHTOPIA, which we're going to talk a lot about tonight. Melati was named one of Time's most influential teens in the world. Forbes magazine named Melati one of the top 10 most inspiring women in Indonesia, and CNN named Melati a young wonder, part of their CNN heroes, if you're aware of those. A movie has been made about her and the network of people that she works with. We're going to talk about COP and her status with COP. She's spoken at the United Nations. I mean, for a 24-year-old, this is a pretty impressive CV already. And we're going to get into it. We're going to find out what makes her tick and why she does what she does. I just want to tell you that we do this very informally. I know we're sitting here with a microphone, and there's a big fat screen in front of us, and you're all sitting there. But it's really warm and happy and intimate. She's a very nice person. Anytime you have a question, just pop in and raise your hand. Please introduce yourself. We'd love to get to know you. Ask a question. Don't do the I have a 3-part question and go on and on. Tell us who you are, but not your life story. And if your question, just by the way, if your question is something that we're coming to later, I might ask you to just wait and we'll come back to that. But if it's on point, then off we go, and I'm happy for the conversation to go in multiple directions, okay? It's totally informal and relaxed. Okay, so let's get into it. Hi, Melati, welcome.
Ooh, hello, wow. Thank you, Mark, for the introduction, but also thank you to all of you for your patience and for the effort and energy to be here today in Hong Kong. I can't wait to dive in.
Okay, so I'm going to do the advertorial right away, right off the bat. Melati has written a book. The book is for sale. I'm going to do multiple commercials throughout the talk and remind you to buy a copy of the book. It is phenomenal. And I just realized that Cristina Figueres did your introduction.
Yeah.
Tell everybody who Cristina Figueres is, because I had the great pleasure of meeting her immediately after Trump was elected the first time.
Yes, I think that was also around the same time that I was introduced to Christiana Figueres. And at the time, I think I was 14 years old, and I was at COP21 in Paris, where the first Paris Agreement for the climate change conferences was created. And who was spearheading that? Christiana Figueres. And there I saw for the first time a political leader who was speaking truth to power in such a way that I just stood there as a 14-year-old girl thinking, I want to be just like her. And I'd followed her journey in these more traditional settings, like the COP conferences of the United Nations, and now more recently with her work with global optimism and her work in mindfulness and its importance in this space of climate change. So her official title is Executive Secretary, UN Climate Change Convention 2010 till 2016, where she spearheaded that Paris Agreement. But what I really like from the foreword that she writes in the book is how her reflection is that the most powerful force, and this is in her words, the most powerful force for change today is not coming from conference rooms or corridors of power. It's coming from young leaders like Melati who combine vision with unstoppable determination. And I think to have that as a recognition from someone who has been on those corridors of power, who has the opportunity to meet with world leaders and have access to decision-making power, her acknowledgement to the power of the youth movement was something I was really proud to be able to include in the book.
Yeah, it's already pretty impressive. Okay, so let's talk about Unstoppable.
Yeah.
Maybe set the scene and give people a little bit of color on your background. Let's go back to the Green School, 12 years old. What possessed you?
Oh, definitely. I think growing up on the island of Bali, it's quite different than the hustle and bustle of here in Hong Kong. But growing up on the island, I think one of the first lessons that I learned, which is part of the book, 100 Lessons of Changemaking, the very first lesson in this book is we are nature. And I learned that at an early age because of my background, because of my upbringing on the island of Bali. I went to sleep with the sound of the ocean, and I woke up with the sound of the ocean. Throughout my entire day, nature was my playground. Nature was my teacher. Nature was everything. And it wasn't rocket science to see that the nature around me was starting to die. It was starting to drown in plastic pollution. And so at 10 and 12 years old, me and my sister said, enough is enough. What are we going to do about it? And I think it's that simple. When you ask the question, what are we going to do? My sister and I, without a business plan, without a strategy, but with a clear vision and a dream of making our island home Bali plastic bag free, we began with our first environmental organization. And the rest, as they say, is history.
Well, no, share the history with us. What happened? It wasn't like snap your fingers and everybody got rid of it. There's a credibility issue there.
Yeah.
And you fought many, many battles.
I mean, you know, the thing that when I look back, I can't really think of like it's the day one feeling. Although in the book, chapter 1, I talk about the curious 12-year-old. And there is this one moment that I do remember where there was just no more looking back. And it's this scene that I describe of the first day that our campaign T-shirts arrived. And it was the first time we saw our logo of Bye Bye Plastic Bags, which was the name of our organization, on T-shirts. And we woke up early that morning to get ready for school. My sister and I put it on and we saw it in the daylight. And we asked our parents to quickly snap a photo of us. And in that moment, me and my sister at 10 and 12 years old, puffed up our chests really big so everybody could read the text, Bye Bye Plastic Bags. And when we went live, it was the first time in 24 hours, 6,000 people signed our petition, pushed the movement forward, and suddenly it became much bigger than two girls with one idea. It became an entire movement. We built our team of young people on the island. That was the first thing that we did. We started creating collaborations with many different levels of society, from our youth-led organization to different companies and organizations on the island working towards the same goal, different government bodies that were also working towards that same goal. And we started to build and push more momentum that, you know, it's not rocket science, like I said before, but it's also not a unique idea. Saying no to plastic is something that so many previously have campaigned for. What was special about us? What stood out? What was different? I think we had the advantage of being young kids. When we entered the room, heads turned and thought, are they in the wrong room or what's going on here? The second one was we started at the right time because the plastic pollution crisis was at such a turning point where everybody was fed up with it. Everybody said we cannot continue. So I think with having the right time, having that advantage point of, okay, young people are also starting to stand up, the movement took off and we quickly became one of the largest organizations in the country.
And meanwhile, you're in the 8th grade, learning geometry
Yes.
and calculus and what have you. But you did go to a unique school.
I did.
That created maybe a platform for you. People don't know about the Green School. Tell people about the Green School.
Yeah, so my sister and I had the opportunity to be scholarship students at the Green School in Bali. It's a bamboo cathedral in the middle of the jungle, literally made out of bamboo, no walls, because the entire concept is to keep that access point with nature at all times. But actually, Mark, I started bioplastic bags after my parents took us out of the school system before Green School, homeschooled us, and took us on a travel around the world where we got to learn different cultures. Again, having been island kids, we didn't really know much about the culture and background where my mom came from, which is the Netherlands. And so when we traveled around the world and came back after several months of that, that's when we started to think about our involvement and what we wanted to contribute back to the community that we came from. And so what Green School and how I believe the education or the educational world plays a role in shaping changemakers is we were so lucky to have the right support in our teachers, but also in the overall curriculum. So if I was in any other school, I probably would not have had the time to do what I did starting bioplastic bags. I was able to convince my teachers that the conferences I was going to, the panels that I was listening to with the scientists or the other entrepreneurs was an equivalent to an English class. I think pretty more than an English class, but I could convince that my English credits could be fulfilled, or that my science credits could be fulfilled. And I think that that was the platform and the strength of a school like Green School.
And okay, so you go through high school, the movement is going, you start other initiatives, you are not a normal teenager, and that's sort of the gist of most of the talk is, for your benefit, I want to get into the leadership qualities and the reasons why so many people get behind Melati and what she's learned about that, but also the choices that you made along the way. So when did you graduate?
In 2018.
No, how old were you?
Oh.
Don't make us do the math.
No. I was 18.
You, okay.
Yeah.
You graduated early.
I did, but my educational curriculum, jumping back and forth, I skipped a grade, then I repeated a grade, and then did homeschooling. It's a school of life.
And so at 18...
Still on it.
So at 18, what were the options? You know, you sort of graduated from school. Lots of kids at that point are either considering a gap year or, you know, trying to get into normal schools. But you absolutely didn't want to do that.
No, I really wanted to graduate and then become a full-time changemaker, which is essentially the title and the way that I've been introducing myself. Hi, my name is Melati, and I am a full-time changemaker. And I was itching to get to that stage towards the end of my high school. And what came out of that, I threw off my graduation cap and I had the first opportunity to film Bigger Than Us, the documentary that I worked on when I was 18, traveling to 7 different countries, meeting other young changemakers who created a big impact in their communities, different than plastic pollution. And I always set up this experience saying that my plastic bubble bursted, because I found myself in Malawi learning about girls who were raped and dropped out of school because they had to raise their own children. I was in Rio de Janeiro and I learned about the favelas and freedom of speech and how lucky all of us are to be able to say freely what we think every single day. I went to Colorado and I learned from Shuteskat, who is a hip-hop artist and singer, rapper, his power through music to raise awareness about the fracking industry. So I met all of these incredible young changemakers, and I think my plastic bubble definitely bursted, but also this growing divide of fear that I think many of us experience, fear and frustration that change is not happening, that it's so much more challenges and problems happening all around us every single day, coupled with this hope and excitement and all the possibilities of everything, all the amazing things that are currently being done by not only government leaders or world leaders or corporates or businesses, but also from people at all ages who are taking leadership into their own hands.
Yeah, so one day we'll screen the film here, and you'll get to see the lives of the other individuals. And so one of the things that you take away from that is there are unbelievable problems in the world. You've got refugee crisis, environmental degradation, slave trade, and et cetera, et cetera. And most teenagers wake up and they feel disheartened and disillusioned and maybe just want to give up. And then you meet somebody like this, who despite all of this, has this incredible energy and optimism. Why?
Yeah, sometimes I ask
Why?
myself the same question.
If we want any parenting tips, by the way, Mother of the Century is right here. So we can do that talk later.
Yeah, I was gonna say, that's maybe a moment and a question for Mom. But all I remember growing up is being described as an old soul in a young body, and there was always that. But I think that there was also, a big level of seriousness, but also the vision for a bigger picture. I never really thought of just me, and it was always nature. Again, we are nature, so the world that I'm living in, the community that I'm a part of. In Bali, we have this lifestyle called Trihita Karana. And this is a beautiful way of life where we live in balance and harmony with nature, the community around you, and the self-awareness within. And I think this balance creates a harmony that we have long lost touch with in the modern world and lifestyle that we all operate on. It's easy to get lost in the hustle bustle and the busyness of a city. And I think that level of awareness within at a very young age is kind of where I've found the drive and also held on to the hope. But I'd like to read a poem from my book. I think it's chapter 6 on growing up. And this was, believe it or not, a poem that I wrote when I was 13 years old in the year 2014. And it's called Growing Up. The girls in my class grow up so fast. No Barbies but bras, no candies but boys. I'm not ready yet. I don't want to board the teenage jet, flying into the sky with a new mind, leaving Winnie the Pooh and the princesses behind. I'm afraid of the land I will arrive on. Shaky ground, nothing left, everything's gone. I'm stuck with the baby face while the rest walk in mini skirts with such grace. The girls in my class say, grow up. But then who knows what the meaning of growing up means? Does it mean to be wise and free, or does it mean to be wearing push-up bras and too much makeup? So then I said, no thanks, I'll stick to the candies and Barbies, Winnie the Pooh and the princesses for just a bit longer. I'm sure the jet can wait. Turned on my heels and saw their faces filled with confusion, and I thought to myself, the girls in my class grew up too fast. And
You can clap. Yeah.
Yeah, so I think that there was always this, it's strange because it's a little bit of a tug of war as well internally of the fear of growing up and growing up in the wrong ways, because a lot of the times I identified growing up with a lot of the adults that I saw in these positions of power who were not using it to actually create change. But then also I knew that there was a lot of clarity that I already saw as a 12-year-old.
So the film, and maybe just give a couple of notes about how that film came together and who was behind the film, and impress people with some of the things that happened.
Yes, so the film Bigger Than Us.
My humble friend who doesn't like to do this.
Yes, I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So the film Bigger Than Us was my first opportunity to film a documentary in a leading role where I got to, again, meet these other changemakers. It was produced by Marion Cotillard, who is an Oscar award-winning actress. It was directed by Flore Vasseur, who had successfully created a lot of documentaries. And so with this support system in place, I kind of had this canvas to discover myself and my views of change making through conversation, and it got put together in a 90-minute piece documentary that got premiered at the Cannes Film Festival in 2021, and that was from an island girl to the red carpet at the Cannes Film Festival, a completely different whirlwind. I was standing there with Timothée Chalamet on my left and Leonardo DiCaprio on my right, and I thought, what am I doing here? But talking about the rooms to be in, from the United Nations to classrooms all around the world, to red carpet events like this, what I learned here was the power of storytelling and the importance of reaching almost every single audience you can and making them uncomfortable. And in this situation, this prestigious film festival, that level of uncomfort was challenged, because you have the glitz and the glam, and then the real life stories of the refugees, and their fight and their struggle every single day, the favelas and their access to freedom of speech. Suddenly this confrontation sparked the conversation for so many in that industry and in that world to start to understand the power they have to be able to platform bigger real life issues. And then at the end of the day, we all went back home to continue doing the work on the ground. So yeah, I think that was an experience. Did that, done that. I don't know if I ever have to do it again, but it was an important space to be that also brought credibility to the film that brought us all around the world.
Okay, so at that point, you've almost created such a groundswell, it's impossible to stop. But I do remember that you were at that juncture, maybe I'm not actually sure where, was it before or after the film, you were offered a full scholarship to get a university degree at a very prestigious Ivy League school. And I remember we talked about it, and I was like, maybe Mom, you were with me, I was like, no, go take the offer, go to school. And you were like, no, I can't. Explain.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, when I graduated high school, all I could think about was becoming this full-time changemaker. So dedicating every single piece of my energy to being in different classrooms, developing programs, and essentially building a platform for more young people around the world to feel like they have access to the tools, the community, the skills that I learned along the way. I wanted to share with as many young people around the world. And that was my sole focus. And at the time, I felt that if I were to go into a traditional route of dedicating another 3 to 4 years at a university, I might lose the momentum that I had started building. Ironically, oftentimes still today, I will meet with CEOs or different leaders asking me, so which university did you go to? And I'm like, I haven't been to university yet, but I've dedicated more than 12 years of my life to a specific goal, to a learning journey of its own. It doesn't necessarily look like a lecture hall, and my professors are not the traditional professors, but they come in the form of incredibly talented young changemakers. One of them is here in the room, Emma Poposka from Hong Kong, here, a young talented filmmaker who has a YOUTHTOPIA program coming up soon. I learned from partners like Katie from the London Speaker Bureau. I learned from the team of AIA here as well, and all of these incredible entrepreneurs, leaders, teachers I've gained access to throughout my changemaking career. I wanted to see how I could channel all of those lessons, all of those mentors, all of those teachings onto the platform of YOUTHTOPIA, which was essentially what I was building, and in a way, looking back a little bit, my university experience that I cater to other young people around the world.
Okay, so basically you've created your own university, and the irony is that you're actually developing curriculum for universities.
Yeah, so actually this is the craziest part, because what I enjoy the most now about my full-time position as a changemaker is that I started with a very clear vision. The first couple chapters are about bye-bye plastic bags. I always say are the training wheels on the bicycle for me. It taught me everything I needed to know about the different levels of change, why the frustration of other people not seeing the same end goal, or how to overcome that. It taught me so much, and that's why the training wheels analogy. But YOUTHTOPIA and the vision for that is really sharing that in simple, accessible, digestible programs. And what I like to do now is mentor a lot of different young change makers to be able to translate their skills and their strengths into programs like master classes or workshops, different mentorship programs. And now we have over 200 programs for free. We have 5,000 students between the ages of 12 and 25 years old who all live on the YOUTHTOPIA learning platform, having that peer-to-peer learning every day.
Isn't that insane? It's incredible. Okay, I just want to pause and give you guys a chance to digest, and if you have any questions at this point, anybody, you're all like ready to keep going? Okay, let's keep going. Welcome, by the way. We're going to find out a little bit about you after. Okay, to get a little bit serious, you go to bed at night. What are the things that give you the most immediate concern about the state of our planet?
There's a lot. I think for me right now, especially, is looking at the more traditional world leaders. I think we have a lot of really powerful economies around the world that have gone through elections in the last 2 years or a year. And our leaders have never been as old as they are today, never been as disconnected as they are with what is going on in the world, never as disconnected to science or listening to young people. And there's a really big growing fear, not only in my in me, but across my generation, where we're one of the most to feel eco-anxiety, right? This overwhelming fear of the reality of the world that we live in, with growing floods everywhere, forest fires, more earthquakes. And I think that fear of the reality of the climate crisis and how disconnected a lot of the world leaders are to actually enforcing change, accelerating change, is what keeps me up at night.
Okay, so I have this super annoying dinner party trick that I do, which I'll do now. Which is, I like to ask people, how many more generations do you think humans will stay on this planet? And if you think about it, since maybe the birth of Jesus Christ, if that's a benchmark, there's been 40 generations. That's 40 grandmothers. It's not a lot. A generation is 25 years. It's 2,000 years, right? So I ask a lot of people, and I'm fascinated by the answers that I get. And so you can all ponder what you think the answer is. What strikes me is that the overwhelming reply that I get from young people is maybe 2-3 generations, 50, 75 years, and that's it. And I think to myself, what gets you out of bed if that's what you believe? If you're feeling that level of despair and lack of hope, how do you make a decision about what to do with your life? And so we talked about this before. What I think you achieve is you maybe prolong that forecast for thousands of kids, and you give them the energy to affect change. And the impact that you're having is the butterfly effect. I mean, it can never be measured. It's you know, infinity. But you interact with a lot of kids. The ones that you recruit or who join you are already energized and motivated. How do you feel about the rest of the kids that you interact with? And you get to go through neighborhoods, favelas, and you see a lot of degradation and you see a lot of depression. How does that impact you?
Yeah, I think I have the real honor of seeing both sides of the generation and of the world most of the times. All the beauty that exists and the joy and the positive energy, the leadership that I see from a lot of young people. All the programs are created by young changemakers on the YOUTHTOPIA learning platform. And then there's the other side of our generation that is completely anchored in anxiety. And I think a lot of that anxiety is created because of a narrative that we follow as well when it comes to creating change. When you think of a change maker, who comes up in your mind? Or what does that leadership look like? Oftentimes it's this need to start something or to be really good at public speaking and to deliver your ideas and to execute, to be a good leader. I saw one time a workshop where a facilitator asked the students, a room of 300 kids, to chant, "Be a lion, don't be a sheep. Be a lion, don't be a sheep." And all these kids started chanting this chant, and I think it really gives a lot of pressure for our generation of expectations of what to be. Because what if you want to be the sheep? What if you want to be a zebra or an elephant? What does that matter? The narrative shift here, what I'm trying to lean towards, is really this importance of celebrating each and everyone's unique strength. But does our education system allow that? Does our current workflow and the opportunities that exist allow that? I don't think so at the moment. And so when we want to empower a generation to step out of their anxiety, how do we create that space to celebrate and encourage them to further continue exploring what their strengths are and connecting it to what the world around them needs? And that's a little bit the pathways that we try to create by showcasing the different role models they can connect to. And I love talking about the power of role models, because when we look at the room, for example, you may all know Greta Thunberg, right? The Swedish changemaker who started Fridays for Future. But how many of you know of the changemaker Nesha Ichida from Indonesia, or Mohammed Al-Junde from Syria, right? A lot more blank faces thinking, I don't think I've heard that name before. But that's okay, exactly. That's the point, creating access to role models, creating access to real life examples so that more of these young people can step out of the anxiety and into a tangible, realistic role model or example that they can follow. And it's time that we start introducing them. It's part of the job that I love the most as well with Youthtopia, highlighting all the different ways that you can create change.
So the other thing about your exposure on a global level to kids, we talked about something that you had noticed between the difference between East and West. And you are effectively a child who's grown up in the East, but have Western influence and family. What are your observations?
So recently I moved to Amsterdam after living my whole life on the island of Bali. Mostly to finish the process of writing the book with my publishers, who are HarperCollins in the Netherlands. And the book is officially out for now a month and a half. And the first month I did 35 engagements in the Netherlands. And these engagements were in universities or high schools, middle schools. And I recognized, maybe it was in the middle of winter, which was the first winter I had ever done, but I felt immediately a change in how we would, or how our workshops were received. Our workshops are designed to really spark the imagination and get people actively thinking what is their role as an individual to start taking action in whichever way. So one of the exercise questions, for example, is if you had a magic wand and you could create any change in the world, what would that be? In the Netherlands, oftentimes the reaction in the room would be just stillness. Not a single person would either know how to answer the question or dare to answer the question, out of fear of saying something ridiculous. Or, I mean, the question is already ridiculous in the first place. But here in Asia, if we are in a classroom and we would ask that question, it would be like popcorn. And the students would say, oh, pick me. I would want to have everybody access to education. Or someone else would say, I would want more kindness in the world. Or someone would say, I want a car, a brand new, shiny car. And all answers are okay. That's not really the point of the exercise. It's, again, just the exercising of imagination. And this was one of the biggest differences growing up in Asia. I had felt at a young age an unlimited access to everything that is possible. If you could dream it, it could be true. And in the Netherlands, there was this, or in the West, perhaps a slightly more hesitant approach to dreaming in the first place, and to actively think, how can I change the world that I'm living in? So I found that interesting, and I see it a little bit as my role, different than when I'm at the UN, or different than when I'm on the red carpet, different when I'm on the islands in Indonesia, but in Europe it's a little bit to exercise our minds, to ask questions, and to get connected to wonder again.
Imagination and dreaming. That's super powerful. And okay, what does the next step look like for you?
Well, one of the things that I wanted to touch on, and it kind of came in the moments where we talked about young people, the positive and the anxiety that we feel. One of the ways that we overcome this is also through intergenerational collaborations. And that's actually one of the biggest things that we're building now for the next step, for the future, also with YOUTHTOPIA. Obviously, the heartbeat and the passion of YOUTHTOPIA is creating those lesson plans and those masterclasses, the workshops for students. But there's also the other side where we create a reverse mentorship program where we connect not only changemakers to the classroom, but changemakers to the boardroom. And this is a really exciting part as well from the evolution of a 12-year-old to a 24-year-old. I've seen the power of what private sector can accomplish if we work together to accelerate change. Different than public sector, which is oftentimes a lot more slower, more hesitant, a lot more waiting for the data, waiting for the proof, trial and error without actually accelerating change. So these reverse mentorship programs with young people to different leaders across industries is something that I'm really passionate about, because I think there's so much untapped potential when it comes to intergenerational collaboration, also because so much youth washing exists in today's world. How many of you are familiar with youth washing? Okay, so we're learning something new today. Greenwashing is when companies or corporates would claim to do something without actually doing it, or at least just brushing the surface. Similar, you can think of it with youth washing, companies, organizations, institutions working together with young people, but just on the tip of the iceberg and not at all on a long-term or meaningful way. So oftentimes, what does this look like? Conferences know we have to include young people because they're an unstoppable generation and they're very inspiring. So inviting us onto a program, and then it's oftentimes, thank you very much for being inspiring, and that's the last we hear of them. So how do we overcome this and create more meaningful intergenerational collaboration? It's in chapter 6, which is discussing all about how to make the differences of our generations, instead of it being a frustration, actually become a strength. And it's a strategy called GO with 2 Gs. The first one is give us the stage, because that is the right first step. It's a good development in the right direction where we are given a platform to share our voice, to share our perspective. But then the second G is go a step further and include us in 2 parts, either before the programming, so allow us to be part of the brainstorming and understanding how the campaign looks, what does the strategy actually entail, what is the program and what is it missing, allow us to give us our thoughts from the start. The second one is after the stage or after the interaction and the headline, it's how do we help with implementation, with strategy, delivery on the ground after the event or the campaign announcement. And then the O is opportunities. So this is where the strengths across generations, where a lot of the times organizations or institutions have access to networks, funding, other resources, mentorship. If we create those bridges to young people on a long term and not just one time, that's essentially how I feel we would create a sustainable, more meaningful collaboration across generations. And that's what we're currently doing across different spaces with YOUTHTOPIA.
So youth washing, I've never thought of this before. I imagine that corporates would love to sponsor you. Have you turned away opportunities because you distrusted the motivation or the incentive or the intention?
Yes, definitely. And I think that's also one of the more powerful things about our generation is that we are one of the most critical, and I know Gen Z sometimes that translates to lazy and hard to work with, but at the same time we are one of the generations that have, with one click of a button, access to so much information, and we are spending a lot of time vetting these requests or collaboration offers, and I think that that's where more and more, as I'm doing this work and the conversations I'm having with young people, there's so much power in saying no, but also when we do say yes, It's about going that extra mile to understand the bigger picture, because we also know that it needs to have everybody.
Hey, how many people here are teenagers? Hey, welcome. How many people here are parenting teenagers or young people? Let's say, still? Yeah. So I guess where I want to go with this is the idea of developing ambition and what drives ambition. You know, there are a lot of kids who are out there trying to, let's say, get a tick in a box for an application to a good university, and so they say, oh, well, I volunteered at this charity this summer, get the tick in the box. And that motivation is totally different from trying to change the world. It's really self-promotional, and then you add all the social media on top of that, and it becomes really quite depressing. To what extent, you know, are you aware of that when with the 5,000 students that you have or participants, and does it concern you, or do you just not care?
Well, I think that it's important to start, and that's also something where maybe it's also helpful if we take that pressure off of it's going to be something that changes the world, because it doesn't always have to be the end goal. Experience is something so valuable, especially at a young age, that when we encourage people or young people to go out there and to experience 2 weeks here, 2 months there, a year here, through that they discover who they are and what it is that they're passionate about and what it is that they're good at. This is an exercise we do often at the workshops we deliver, which is following the ikigai of the Japanese concept and way of life of finding purpose. Ideally, if you answer these 4 questions, you find your life's purpose. What are you good at? What do you enjoy? What do you love? What does the world around you need? And how are you able to sustain that financially? Yeah? And so this is an exercise that we do in a fun way, where 4 students have to give 4 different answers, and then we come up with a project on its own. So it could look like, I love hiking, I love the world around me needs clean water, I'm really good at bringing people together, and we could financially make that work by hosting a community hike to raise awareness and money on clean water. There you go. On a very quick, short basis, but this is essentially an exercise and a tool that if we reflect on quite regularly, we're able to get closer to that. But I also don't think it's fair to assume that a 12-year-old or a 14-year-old or an 18-year-old applying for university with their project is going to be doing that forever. Bye Bye Plastic Bags was the first 10 years of my activism journey, and now it's full-time on YOUTHTOPIA. Today I'm here with my first ever published book. The cool thing is that when we talk about change, as individuals, we also go through a lot of change. And that's a different narrative that I think needs to start being normalized as well.
So that's pretty cool. You're going to cease being a youth.
Yes, I know.
And then suddenly you won't have that sort of entry point that gives you access to an awful lot. And eventually someone's going to call you an adult.
I know.
And you're no longer going to, you know, it's coming.
I know.
And then you're going to be your grandmother. How does that affect you? And are you sort of thinking about that transition as it's coming?
Yes, I think I've been transitioning or thinking about that transition since 18 years old. I remember on my 18th birthday, I thought, oh my God, I'm already ending my teens. And now then the next time that anxiety came for me was 21, because, oh my goodness, then it's official. And now at 24, I'm kind of more relaxed and thinking, okay, Mel, there's a lot of power to holding on to that 12-year-old, the curious 12-year-old, which is how chapter 1 is titled. But stepping into the age, no matter how old you are, we all have the ability to create change in every moment, in every decision that we make every day of our lives. But how does it affect me? I think that's why I'm also super focused on building YOUTHTOPIA and how we can create a sustainable, long-lasting platform for young people to find their strengths, find their voices. And so I almost start to see myself in a sort of shift from someone at the front lines to slowly creating empowering spaces for others to get to their best potential of what I've been able to do with Bye Bye Plastic Bags, the movie, the book, everything else.
And okay, let's do this in two parts. Many would imagine you speak at the United Nations, you Cannes Film Festival, you must have a Ferrari at home, and you must have houses around the world, and you live a luxurious life.
I wish, but
Okay.
no.
So how do you fund yourself?
Yeah. So with YOUTHTOPIA, we are a company set up in Singapore and had the immense honor and privilege to be supported via angel investments to get us up and running for the first years. We're now entering our 5th year. And how we sustainably make a funding for us is the programs we offer to schools, which is tailor-made, 3 months oftentimes, the changemakers to classrooms. And the other side is our reverse mentorship, where we work with different companies and organizations. And then there's a third element, which is our speaking agency. And that's where Katie from the London Speaker Bureau has created a wonderful partnership with YOUTHTOPIA, and it's also in the book. But what we realized is that young people often get invited to many of these big conferences all around the world as inspiration and don't often get the same compensation that many CEOs or other speakers get when they spend time on stage. So we said something is not happening, something is not working here. How do we change that? And personally, I've been represented by the London Speaker Bureau for the last several years, which has been able to fund myself and YOUTHTOPIA to where it is now. But what we did with the speaking agency is create opportunities for many other young people to get support in the negotiations, in the access to these opportunities, and that has also been one of the ways that YOUTHTOPIA is able to keep on going.
Okay, super nice to have you here. Can I get you something? I'm a little worried I'm going to get an invoice after tonight. Okay, so there is a for-profit model behind what you're building, and if it's angel investment, I'm assuming that there's a structure where eventually they may expect a return on that investment. So that is very much the business mind of Melati is kind of evolving.
Yes, and definitely it's gone through a lot of different changes because, graduating high school and the excitement of the full-time changemaker, I've talked so far in that excitement, with that excitement hat, but then also all of a sudden I thought, oh my goodness, there's all these, the administration, the company. Chapter 4 is titled "The Big Company, the Big Team, the Big Office: A Dream or a Curse," because suddenly there was a brand new office that we built in Bali with the concept of upcycled shipping containers, 5 of them stacked onto each other with a garden out front, powered by solar panels. It was the dream headquarters. And suddenly it was filled with people. There were desks everywhere. The Wi-Fi was working. We had a printer all of a sudden. And then I thought, oh my goodness, I'm 18 years old and I'm walking into my own office. But with it came a lot of different skills that were needed that I didn't have at 18 years old. There were a lot of decisions and learning how to prioritize and learning what to say yes to and what no to. And I think that's where the power of mentorship comes in. It's where the power of building the right team, having the right business model. At first, for example, YOUTHTOPIA was designed to have a learning platform with all of these programs behind a paywall. We had no paying customers. We had all this beautiful content, but nobody was paying because we learned that our clientele, our target audience, didn't have deep pockets. 12 to 25 years old were allocating money for school, and then their parents were paying for after-school activities or for Netflix or for Spotify. What is YOUTHTOPIA? So then we pivoted away from that because my business model wasn't aligned with my vision or mission to make education accessible. And so we changed it to becoming fully for free, but that's not sustainable either. And so from that learning journey and many other discussions, we've now built the model around the tailor-made programs for schools, the tailor-made programs for corporates and companies on a consulting basis, and then the speaking agency with young changemakers. And that is a model that has been working well so far. And we're not making millions and we're not making a lot of money, but we're slowly getting our sea legs as a young startup.
Okay, so welcome to adulthood.
And I'm the oldest as well in the company, so this is where I'm having a lot of joy, but it's also a lot of like I'm working with these interns and incredible community builders, and I think every day I'm learning from this fresh sense of energy and different directions. So I guess in a way it's already beginning the reverse mentorship on me, but yeah, no, it's a lot of fun.
So that's kind of where I wanted to go. Now you have stress and you have responsibility and you have people who look up to you and rely on you, and that creates anxiety for a lot of entrepreneurs. How do you deal with mental stress, and how has it evolved in the 14 years?
This is, I think, it's still in chapter 4, because I think
it's still in chapter 4, like they move around?
Yeah. I think that's the longest chapter. Editing that one was a bit of a nightmare, but I think because I really dive deep into what my relationship to handling stress looked like, and it went through an evolution. Again, think about the serious Melati, but even more so when I felt a lot of the pressure on my shoulders constantly, growing as the team was getting bigger, the vision was getting bigger. And I think the lesson that I learned is don't take things so personally. And I think that that's a lesson that we all learn at one point when we hit that rock bottom. But taking the pressure off and also learning when to delegate and when to ask for help. It wasn't always the easiest, and I think I'm still learning that most days. But creating...
I'm calling you out on this answer because it's too clean. I don't know how many people here are entrepreneurs, but if you are and you're business owners or you run a corporation or whatever it is, you have deep responsibilities. I was at a talk and a guy he started by asking the audience a series of 10 questions, and he said, we all had to stand up, and he said, if you are, if this is true about you, please sit down. And by the end, nobody was sitting down. And I mean, everybody was sitting down, right? Like so his questions were, do you lie awake at night? Are you an alcoholic? Do you have suicidal thoughts? Do you curl up under your desk in a fetal ball and cry? And et cetera, right? And so everybody in the room was acknowledging, and then he said, these are the questions that are asked of manic depressives. And the room, of course, was a room full of entrepreneurs. Entrepreneurs match manic depressives absolutely like for like, right? It is a high stress environment, and your mental state is often challenged. And I cannot imagine that you are able to hold that off, that you're absent of that. Like, it's all true.
Yeah.
Do you, don't lie, do you curl up in a fetal ball under your desk and turn the phone off and say, no, I need an hour?
Was it standing up or sitting down? No, but you're completely right. And I think also there's a sense of guilt as well when those feelings do come up, because I think, I'm so lucky to be able to do this work. I'm so lucky to be able to travel, to meet incredible young people who have heard of our stories from middle school to high school and see us as role models, because if we can do it, they can do it. I mean, how cool is that? But then I will say, when the first month of this book tour in the Netherlands, after every session, especially towards the end, 35 sessions in 1 month, I was realizing that I was not getting the same energy as I used to. Instead, I was getting so drained. I was exhausted after a session of 2 hours with students. That had never happened before. And I think that I feel very much that worry growing. Maybe it's the environment that I was in over there, of a sense of loss of hope. And I think that scares me the most when I am with an audience or when I'm with a group of people that simply thinks, yeah, but it's already doomed. And I think that becomes too strongly of a mirror where I start to lose sight of everything that I learned from 12 years old. But what I do is I call 5 people that I look up to, and I just have a 12-minute conversation. And there's a scientific study that actually shows 12 minutes talking to someone that you look up to, someone that you admire, someone that you deeply care about, can already change your perspective on different things in life. So that's one of my biggest tools. At the end of this book of 100 lessons, there's a list of 100 names of different, incredible, inspiring changemakers that you can probably reach out to for a 12-minute call. And I know that that makes me feel a lot more grounded and a bit of a touch of reality when I think we're all doomed. I think, no, Mo is doing really incredibly well in Syria, and Mary is doing amazing work in Greece. Someone else is doing incredible work on a farm. Someone else is creating an exhibition on photos. So I think it's just reminding yourself that there's a lot of good people doing incredible things all the time.
Yeah, that's amazing. So one of the tools is gratitude.
Yep.
Another tool is mentorship and community. And what about burnout? You live an incredibly busy life, and there are demands for your time all over the place. It gets exhausting. How do you reset? What's your theory about it?
Yeah. At first, I used to think that there could be a quick fix for burnouts, and I was craving to find it because I knew there was something out there. There must have been.
Adderall.
No, I don't think I was old enough or even had access to any of that stuff. But for me, it was also more like, okay, I just need to go to a silent retreat and not talk for 10 days and I'll reconnect with my soul. Or, I just have to go and go to do an Ayurveda yoga session and it'll all be good. I'll just change my diet or I'll run a little bit more. Instead of 5K, I'll do 10K today. And so I think it was like this crave for a quick fix. And the harsh reality of that, after 3 years of consistent burnouts by month of September, every year in September, I started to lose that fire. I thought, okay, something's not working. Something needs to change. And I think that's where I don't know if I have the answer yet, but that's part of handling the burnouts or the exhaustion that comes with this work. It's about knowing that you don't have all the answers. And instead of running and finding distraction, it's oftentimes sitting with a lot of the things that make us uncomfortable. Why are you not feeling aligned again? Is it the strategy? Is it the audience? Is it the things you're saying yes to where you should actually be saying no to? Mohammed, who I always reference, you've heard his name a couple of times. He is from Syria, and when he was 12 years old, he had to flee his home country, and he ended up in Lebanon. And for someone who went through such traumatic realities at such a young age, he is one of the most positive people on planet Earth. And he talked to me about burnout, and he said, Melati, you know what? It's actually a privilege to burn out. So many of us don't have the time or the ability to sit in that feeling of burnout. So when you are in that position, when you have the ability to sit and to rest and to reflect, to re-strategize, you better ask yourself the question, why are you doing this work? And switch it. A burnout doesn't have to be bad. A burnout can be an opportunity to change the way we're doing things. And I always add that the literal definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different outcome. So change starts now, and it starts with you.
Pearls of wisdom that I get from you. And what is your superpower? And just so you understand the film is basically hosted by Melati, and she travels around the world and meets these different changemakers and discusses the project that they're involved in and what drives them and what challenges they face. And so she's somewhat the narrator of the project. Is that fair to say? So what's your superpower?
I think my superpower is to tell stories and to bring people on a journey of imagination for a better world. And I didn't always like public speaking. In fact, I think I was terrified by it. I don't know if I ever told you this, Katie, because you've only seen me on stages, but for me, when I was a lot younger, I was that kid in the back of the classroom, absolutely terrified whenever a school presentation would come up and look down and say, okay, if I don't look at the teacher, they might not see me. And today, I think I've found my superpower in telling stories, and again, the imagination, because I attach myself to something much bigger than myself. And so there comes, I don't know, a bigger source, a bigger energy for me to stand up in front of 9,000 people, 20 people, 100 people, and share that bigger vision for a new story for people to believe in once again.
It's amazing. Okay, come, questions. Anybody? Okay, while you're pondering your question, thank you. Come, sir.
My name is Philip. In a very short time, 12 years, you've obviously done a lot of things. If you could identify one point of meeting someone in a position of power or the ability to change or not change that actually pleasantly surprised you by that meeting. So by that I mean someone that you thought, they're not going to move, they're not going to, but they did. And if so, why? What do you think happened?
Oh, this is a really great question. And I think I'm going to bring it back to Christiana Figueres from the very start of the conversation tonight. I brought up the COP conferences. I was 14 years old when I went to my first COP in Paris, COP21. And there was such a big swell of hope of, yes, this is the climate conference that is going to change the world. This is it, the Paris Agreement. Young people were happy, companies were happy, government were happy, and we saw change happening. But then COP22 came around and we saw a different presidency and the world sort of changed, and suddenly there was this divide again amongst those three different levels of change. And throughout these conferences, something that I have seen positively change a couple of years ago, I think 2-3 years ago, these more traditional spaces like the COP conferences endorsed young people as an official stakeholder by giving us a very own pavilion. So what does this actually mean and look like in practice? Countries around the world have a pavilion at these exhibition halls, and it's very either corporate or country-led. For young people to have their very own pavilion was the recognition that I saw of spaces and positions of power where they created change to uplift the youth on a formal way that worked in this setting. And that has created such a shift in the way those COP conferences operate. And the best place to be now at those gatherings is the Children and Youth Pavilion. So I think that gave me a lot of hope of an example where I saw decision-making power translated into something actually providing young people with a platform.
Anybody else? Yeah, sir.
Thanks. Hi there. My name's Tim. I've been kind of resonating quite a bit with what you've said and also what you were saying as well around sort of startups and burnouts and that side of things. I run a sustainability startup in Hong Kong and experienced pretty severe burnout last year. I made the decision to step away, and I'm now back teaching again, teaching at international school, design and technology. And one of the things I've been really keen on pushing, having had the experience in sustainability, is to try and get young kids into change making, problem solving, and wanting to choose a slightly different path in life. One of the biggest challenges that I come across in Hong Kong schools, international schools in particular, is I would say parents that are very determined as to what their kids are going to be. And it's very challenging to change those opinions. Students, you can quite often tell they want to go this way. Parents are, you're going that way. And there's only so much we can kind of do to that extent. I'd love to hear from your perspective, because you speak to so many students from probably all around the world. Any tips on that one? And yeah, just any stories you've got would be really interesting to hear.
Yeah, this is a great question, and something that we face in many different classrooms, also with the many diverse cultures that we interact with. I was yesterday afternoon on a Zoom call with students from Malaysia, And that's also quite a culture and background where a lot of the expectations for students after school is to go straight into the corporate world and make a success and make their parents proud. And this session was designed as an Ask Me Anything, where students can fire rapid questions to the changemaker visiting. And yesterday was my turn. And most of the questions, and mind you, they're middle school students at this age, but they were so curious as to how the funding model works, how to convince their parents, because they were experiencing that exact same challenge. I'm wondering, before I continue, if you want to give some insights from a parental perspective. So I'm giving you the mic. Ladies and gentlemen, my mother.
Thank you, Melati, and thank you for that remark and question. I think what we have noticed is that if you choose a school, you choose a school that is close to the value and norms of the family that you carry as a family. At least that's what we did. By letting them go to green school, we knew that the academics would be less or not on an IB level, yeah. But the other qualities and the other skills and the other abilities that they were given and the way they were learning made them so much more well-rounded global citizen. And if you look to the world that we're living in, we do not necessarily need more people with an IB degree, right? We need much more problem solvers, storytellers, people who seeing where the world is going to. And if we do not do quickly something about it, it goes wrong. And I teach Melati and Isabel, her sister, always to dream big. Dream very big, but be also not shy to share that dream. And I think that it is a shame that you see with kids nowadays that they don't dare to do that because everybody thinks everything about somebody else, right? And at schools, everybody wants to be everything to everybody. If you're a school where you learn in this way, you cannot deliver a child with an IB level. It doesn't exist. There are so many hours at school. And the kids don't want that academic degree net per se anymore, but the parents are still all focused on deliver the next academic or business leader for the world, and that is something we have to let go.
Yeah, I want to chime in on this because I'm a completely failed parent.
Not true. Both. I'll say in a second, but yeah, go ahead.
My daughter chose to go to university, and she goes to a good school in Boston. She's pursuing a career in international relations, and I have, ever since she was 10 years old, encouraged her not to do that, and tried to encourage her to drop out of high school and start something and join a revolution. And when she and Melati became friends, I thought, well, this is it. Like, she's now found somebody who can corrupt her and take her down that path. And she worked with YOUTHTOPIA, and her best friend eventually became your co-founder. And my daughter went down this horrible path of de-risking herself. And I still try to encourage her, you know, as she's about to graduate, to go and take a year off and find the voice inside her, not the influence. What is very fortunate about Melati is that she encountered that voice at a very, very young age. And many of us can go through our whole life with never finding it. And so I'm like, hey, what is the problem you want to solve? What is the contribution you want to make to the world? If you don't know, then don't go get a job. Go wander and wonder and let the world tell you. Yeah. You know? And this is, to me, like, it's a critical thing. But try as I might, she has this incredible ambition and drive, but I don't know if she knows what's driving that ambition, if you understand, right? So it bugs me how unbelievably rigorous kids are in ticking the boxes so that they can apply to university, get that proper brand on their CV, and then apply. What I can tell you, and what you know very well, is that it is incredibly competitive out there. It is to the point of being really upsetting and discouraging, and it causes anxiety. Kids are incredibly competitive with each other, and that's what drives it. And the ones that don't fall by the wayside. So anyway, that is my journey as a horrible parent. There's something else I want to share, which is just a funny aside, but Melati came to Singapore a couple of weeks ago, and she and my son and her co-founder Lily went out. My son took them to a nightclub, and Melati is a celebrity. Like she's a rock star. I didn't know this, but apparently at the nightclub at like 4 a.m, the nightclub board flashed like "Welcome Melati and Lily from YOUTHTOPIA," like it was like Drake was in the house. like how amazing is that? So how does that feel?
Yeah, it was definitely a surprise and a shock, and not something you expect at 4 a.m. at a nightclub when you're just, partying and having fun. But I think also, very surreal. I still sometimes, it's a pinch me moment, but it was all thanks to your wonderful son who organized that beautiful night out. And that brings me to balance.
Who's 2 years younger than the age limit to get in. It worries me. It's okay. I just don't know how we got in. But also, you are a normal human being sometimes.
Yeah.
Like you do go out and have fun. And
yes.
You date.
Currently single. The only relationship I'm entertaining is with my book. But yeah, no. I think that's also something that I not struggle with, but there is this. The personal and the professional, and sometimes I always feel a little bit confused, like, because I live and breathe and am this change maker, how do I make sure that that's something that becomes a lifestyle? And that's what I talk about a lot in my book through those developmental years of 12 to 24 years old. I've gone through heartbreaks. I've gone through moving from a different country. I've gone through finding my friends and then not my real friends, and what it takes to be a change maker. And the conclusion really is that it's a lifestyle. And I think, to go back to your question, to add just a tangible last piece of advice from, not a parent, is also allow space for pilot projects. Track record, allow them to, come up with a very small but very specific, tangible change and show that they can do it. If we create cultures where we set ourselves up for success instead of failures, imagine the world we would live in. If we would allocate as much time on the positive and all the possibility that exists, as much time as we allocate currently to the doom and the gloom and what doesn't work and all the frustrations, imagine the world we would live in. It's a world I want to live in, and it's one that I'm working towards building.
Are there other questions? Thank you.
So kids these days are kind of, not getting bored, but almost tired of older people coming in and terrifying them with doomsday speeches and telling them that the world is not doing well, to say the least, and repeatedly telling them that, and then repeatedly giving them the same solutions that feel like they don't work. And it's scaring us, and so because it's scaring us, it's also pushing us away from trying to actually build change because it feels impossible. How do you think we could change that relationship that kids have with change that isn't just we need to do something, but something is terrifying and we can't do anything about it despite what people tell us?
Well, first of all, I think it's a really accurate analysis, Nil, and thank you for being here, and thank you for always, I think every time I'm on a Zoom and I see you and the interactions, you're very, you're not what you're describing, which gives me hope. But it's also about what we try and do with YOUTHTOPIA, and the power that we feel we have is by putting young change makers in front of students who are the same ages, you start to change the way you think of your role and how you can contribute. Because it's, again, creating that if you can do it, I can do it narrative. But it's also, I think what needs to stop is the sugar coating, or about the, okay, this is the doom and gloom, but 1, 2, 3, we have to create change in this way. I think it should be more around giving the trust back to the students to be actively involved in creating the action plan of how and what that world they want to live in looks like. What is important to them? What are the challenges that they see happening locally around them that they are passionate about, that they care about? I think it's a much more inviting approach rather than a pointing fingers, let me tell you what to do. Which is a little bit where, I think we've tried to develop in different workshops in classrooms around the world. But I'm curious, if you have any
Can you just
input.
introduce yourself a little bit?
Oh, I'm sorry, I forgot about that part. I'm Nil Charbonneau, and I'm this man's daughter. Normally, I have a very loud voice. I would speak without the mic, but I've been sick for a few days, so.
What are you up to? Are you...
I'm a student in the French International School of Hong Kong, and I am currently working towards building a future for myself and for the world, which is a hard thing to balance, I think.
You're in high school.
Yes.
Amazing. Do you know what that thing is yet, or is it still a work in progress?
I want to be a musician,
Nice.
but the school is telling me to go to university and do all these sorts of things, so.
Go to his school, take his class. Okay, amazing. And are you part of the 5,000 kids on Utopia?
No, I don't think so, no.
Okay, awesome.
One of the cool collaborations that we have done with the school, though, is for an international film festival. And if you want to talk a little bit about that, yeah.
Yeah, we are happy to work with YOUTHTOPIA on a film festival. So young people in many schools in Asia now. Yes, they make films actually, really, well, in that case, really inspired by your film. It's documentary film mostly. Yes, so each year we have this screening of multiple gaze of young people in Asia, and for them it's always a strong experience as they meet people in the local environment who act for so many causes, and so it's always it's a big pleasure to see these students on a journey of change making through filmmaking.
Yeah.
Yes, and so we have this partnership.
Exactly. I was going to say something, but then it quickly disappeared from my
Just so we move the
brain,
mic while you think about that. There were a
Yes.
couple of other questions. Yes, young lady. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Yo-Yo. I'm an editor with Tele Asia, and I write about startup and entrepreneurs. And whenever I talk to them recently, they seem to be very negative, maybe because the economy is bad, and then it seems like everyone care about surviving other than living. So they think it's very difficult to make an impact in the world. So compared to when you first started Bye Bye Plastic Bag, do you think it is more difficult for youth changemaker to have their voice heard in the international stage, and have your strategy evolved over the years?
I think there's been, the door has gotten wider, as I say, over the years, where I think it was always exceptional at the beginning when we started Bye Bye Plastic Bags and I was 12. We would be the only young people in the room, where today I'm in the room and there are many, many, many more young change makers in the room. So in that sense, I think access to these places is growing, but I think to be heard on a real, deeper, meaningful level, it takes a lot more time and energy and effort. So that's where what we try and do with the reverse mentorship is guiding different platforms on how to build that, with the strategy of involving us prior to the campaign or the stage and the implementation of strategy. Yeah, I'm a bit distracted with hearing my mom in the background, but I hope I answered
Was
your
that your
question.
mom?
Yeah, right?
Good Lord.
Oh.
Sorry.
Hope you're okay, Mom.
Yo-Yo, thanks for being here, by the way. Hi. Yeah. Please.
Hi, I'm John. My current role is an education advisor for a group of schools here in Hong Kong. You spoke at our conference very recently. Thank you for doing that. One of the things I'm worried about is that education currently isn't serving students well, and to the extent that I'm currently writing a manifesto of some ideas about how education could be different. I was really taken by your point about youth washing, and I'm wondering, is education effectively just youth washing at this point in time? And if so, what should we do about it? Thank you.
Yeah, that's a great, again, analysis and view of this, because essentially you have to also think of the way that we teach and the way that we learn shapes who we become. And we grow in the direction of the questions we ask and the stories we tell. But what questions are we asking, and what stories do we essentially have access to that inspires and builds our foundation as people? So when we go into a classroom with YOUTHTOPIA, the first thing is that we want to also identify the level of action from these students already. And oftentimes you can get a feeling of this by asking students an open-ended question, like, for example, the magic wand question at the very beginning. Are they active? Are they answering questions? Do they take themselves seriously? Or are they not? You know, some reactions in classrooms are, is this a question where she wants us to, give our opinions and give our voices, or is this real? Because teachers don't usually do that. Teachers don't ask for questions. They rather tell and download knowledge back to their students. So I think, yes, a fundamental shift within the education system is where students are an active part in the designing of what they're learning. The world is changing, and it's time that the educational spaces reflect that change as well. If you look at all the other industries, this used to be a dial, right? Where you had to dial, I don't even know how it works, I wasn't born. The first car, right? To the self-driving Teslas that we've got now. I mean, there's an evolution in every industry, but when you look at a classroom of 100 years ago and a classroom of today, a black and white photo to a colored photo of 2024, 2025, almost identical. Rows and rows and rows of tables, the whiteboard in the front, the teacher in the front, and the students one by one next to each other. How? Why? So what's that change looking like, especially in today's world when we talk about empowering a generation of change makers? It starts by actively involving these young students who learn every day with access to the internet. Are we even teaching us how to ask the right questions on this thing? Are we asking us do we feel like an active part of our community that we come from? Do we know our neighbors? Do we know our teachers? Do we know the community change makers that exist out there? I think this is one of the things we've delivered really proudly with YOUTHTOPIA, a program that we've done with the CISA network, Central Eastern European School Association, 38 schools, 250 students selected to be part of this YOUTHTOPIA program, where over the course of 3 months, we mentor these students to develop a 3-day in-person summit where they all come together in person, but they get to design what they want to learn. And so over this course, virtually, we're meeting on Zoom, they're meeting with different change makers, they're identifying local problems, and then we come together in an in-person gathering, which has then the impact of the face-to-face meetings, in-person debates, and then the impact of that is like seeing a seed grow into a sunflower. And I think that's what I'm hoping to achieve in classrooms all around the world, starting with this book, but also a small shout out to something really exciting that's coming out of the book is an offer to develop my very own minor program for universities, which is kind of cool. Going back to the university conversation, here you have someone that didn't go to university currently working on designing a minor program, which will be piloted in 5 universities across the Netherlands. And this is what we need more of, where young change makers come together, develop programs that we think are relevant to the world that we live in, that we see missing in the education curriculum, and not become competitors within the education industry. It's simply a necessary additional element that is currently missing. And that's everything that YOUTHTOPIA is delivering. So I'd love to talk more and see how we can... Yeah, my thinking exactly.
That's a wonderful question. Any other hands in the room going up? Going once? Going twice? Okay, we're going to wrap up. Melati, I have to ask you, magic wand, wave your magic wand. What is your thing?
Yeah, so it's actually tying nicely back to what we were just talking about. I think that change starts in the classroom, and I want to see that change happening much earlier. So my magic wand would be that all classrooms all around the world on a mandatory basis teach sustainability, environmental literacy, and change-making skills.
Amazing. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, this has been a wonderful conversation, and thank you all for joining us. Please help me to thank Melati and her mom for being here tonight, and thank yourselves for being here tonight. Yeah,
Thank
well
you.
done.
Thank you very much.